it's clear to you as to what you need or what we need collectively to make sure that we have national reporting a platform and the platform respond to your needs. Please also note that the deadline for submitting the report has been extended to 31st of March 2021. In terms of structure of the session, I'll be chairing or moderating the session today, but I'll be assisted by my colleagues, Eduardo Moreno, Osa, that many of you know already, and Lynn, Ben Narima, who's leading the work on the guidelines for reporting, Robin Dugwa, who's leading the work on the indicators framework. We want to make this session, the presentation to you as succinct as possible so that we can then give you the floor for you to ask questions and make comments. With this structure, I'm not sure if Eduardo has joined us now. Let me check. I don't see him here. Osa, perhaps we can invite Eduardo to say a few words when he joins us. But for now, Osa, let me give you the floor so that you take us quickly through the platform. Osa, over to you. And after that, I'll give the floor to Ben and Robert and open the floor for questions. Osa, over to you.
Thank you, Pacom, and greetings to everybody. I'm the manager for the Urban Agenda platform. I've communicated with a number of you, and we're so pleased to have such a big attendance today. We do recognize that there's time zone differences, etc. So we will also be holding another session, as my colleague Pacom said, again, probably in a few weeks' time. My colleague Lynn is actually going to be the one to show you on the screen, and Lynn, you can start to pull that up as I'm speaking, how you register and do the online reporting on the Urban Agenda platform. But before giving Lynn the floor, perhaps since Eduardo will only be joining us a bit later, just to highlight the importance of preparing these national reports. As many of you will be aware, UN Habitat is mandated to support the preparation by the UN Secretary General of the quadrennial report on the implementation of the new urban agenda every 4 years. And the first such report was prepared in 2018, which is 2 years ago exactly. So we're halfway to the next such report, which will be in 2022. And it was recognized in the preparation of the first one that we, as a global community, we can systematize and go deeper in terms of sharing lessons, what has worked, how we collect evidence within our countries as we move into the next report. And from UN Habitat's side, we have invested in this platform, in the guidelines that you will hear about, as well as the monitoring framework, to support this process to be as thorough, as comprehensive, as inclusive, as it can be. And we look forward to working with all of you as focal points through this process to make it as easy for you as well to follow and to support your processes in countries, also through UN Habitat's country and regional offices. So just wanted to say that as an overview, and now give the floor to you, Lynn. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Osa. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues, depending on where you're joining in from. Please let me know in the chat box if you're able to see my screen.
We can see the screen, Lynn. Go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, so in front of you, we have the Urban Agenda platform. In order to register, you will need to go to the login button in the top right, and right at the bottom, you will see the sign up button. So once you click on that, you will be directed to the registration page, which looks like this. On this page, you'll be required to fill in your first name and last name, your email address, gender, your country and city, your password. And for the password, users are advised to use a password with capital letters and numbers and special characters as well. Proceeding right after that, you'll be required to key in the name of your organization. So in this case, it could be a ministry, could be the Ministry of Housing or Ministry of Urban Development. If the name does not pop up on this list, feel free to just type in the name of the ministry directly. After that, you will be required to indicate that you're the focal point of your organization. Well, in this case, if you are the focal point, please make sure to select yes. If not, you can select no or not sure and then proceed. Right after that, you'll be required to key in your title of function and the code presented in the capture image. Last but not least, we advise colleagues to agree to our terms of use by selecting on this checkbox. So once you have filled all the boxes, and you'll need to select the sign up button, after which you will receive an email informing you that your account registration is pending approval. So from our end, we'll get a notification, and after reviewing your account and cross-checking it against the names and emails that were submitted by the member state focal points, we will approve. Once approved, you will receive an email informing you that your account has been activated. So that's the simple process of registration. I will proceed to show you how to upload a national report on the online form. So once your account has been activated, you'll be able to log in directly on the platform like so. And from here, there are two processes or two entry points for accessing the online reporting form. So you can go directly to the member state page from the blue button that you're seeing on the screen, or you can go to the top bar and directly click on member states. This will take you to the member states page. Once you're on the member state page, just on the right, you'll be able to find the upload report button. So once you click on this button, it will take you to the online reporting tool. As you can see on the page, some of the fields have already been filled. This is because it was picked up on once I did the registration. So right after that, you will need to fill in your details. And for purposes of this demonstration, I will use my details. So users are advised to key in the two names, their position role, their office or department, their email address, phone number, and that's for the first contact focal point. Users will also be required to key in details of an alternative focal point. And for this case, I will just use my colleague's details. And that's it for this second section. Now, once we get to the second half of this page, we have the executive summary. And here, users are required to give a narrative of the country's progress in implementation of the new urban agenda. And this includes the status, outlook, successes, and challenges encountered. Users should also include a description of the processes adopted when preparing this report, highlighting the coordination at the various levels of the government, participatory and inclusive methods. So for purposes of this demonstration, I'll just use placeholder text. Please take note of the word limits in these sections. That way, it will enable the report to be comprehensive and also user-friendly. Once you have filled this form, users can also select the sustainable development goal that their country is working towards. And please note that you're able to select more than one sustainable goal. So after all the details have been filled, we will proceed to the next step. So on the second page of the online form, we have the transformative commitments, and this section simply enables the form to focus on how the member states are achieving or meeting the transformative commitments of the new urban agenda. Responses in this section should include indicators, either qualitative or quantitative, as well as incorporate the inclusion of women and vulnerable groups such as youth, older persons with disabilities, and migrants. So as you can see, it's divided into 3 parts. And for the first part, you'll simply be required to click on the first subcategory and key in the details here based on what the national government is doing. So once you fill this section, please proceed to the second part, where you will do the same, providing the narrative as required. As you can see here, we have the question to guide your brief description or narrative. So feel free to follow in detail what the question asks and provide the required information. Please also note that all the questions are not mandatory. However, we encourage member states to answer as many questions as possible. So once this section is filled, please proceed to the third step. Here we have the effective implementation categories. This section of the report focuses on member states enabling policy framework at the national level. It should include a narrative for each of the implementation categories. So we have 2 main categories on this section: building the urban governance structure and planning and managing urban spatial development. Within that, we have subcategories, and this is where member states are invited to describe the results achieved, challenges experienced, lessons learned, best practices, etc. So once this section has been filled, we'll proceed to the 4th step, where we have the follow-up and review. This section is very straightforward. Member states are invited to describe the mechanisms, tools, framework, and/or methodology that have been developed by their national governments. This section should also include a description of how the government is working in partnership with stakeholders to monitor and report on the implementation of the new urban agenda. So once this is done, we'll proceed to the final step, which entails additional information. So here we'll include publicly accessible websites such as platforms, web links, maps, tables, etc. And this will be included as annexes in the report. We also encourage you to put your social media handles so that we can be able to strengthen our communication and outreach. So once all the fields have been filled, you can come in and click on publish. So as you can see here, we've published the information on the Republic of Kenya webpage. So already it is picking some of the text which we have keyed in the form, and the other text will be able to, users will be able to download it in a button which will appear here. Because this is a demonstration, that we do not have the button at the moment, but users will be able to have a downloadable button of the report here. In case there are any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, that's it from my end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. We'll take the question at the end of all the interventions. But of course, if participants have questions, they can use the chat function of Teams to pose their questions, and then when we're done with presentations, we'll respond to these questions. You also have the option of raising your hand with Teams. Thanks, Lynn. I would like us to move to Ben and Robert for presentations on the use of the guidelines and also the indicator frameworks. But I see that we've been joined by Eduardo. Eduardo, before I give the floor to Ben, do you want to say a few words, please? 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. From Mexico, where I am now, to all member states joining this meeting, to tell you that in UN Habitat, I'm the head of research and innovation and in charge of the monitoring of the new urban agenda. Just to recall that one of the important agreements during Quito was that every 4 years we need to prepare a monitoring mechanism through something that is called the quadrennial report. And by doing this, also to recall member states that this is a country-led voluntary reporting. And what we are doing with this process is to create conditions for member states to report in a more consistent manner that enable us to do comparability, that enable us to do regional aggregates and to understand specific indicators. We have been working because we have the experience of previous years in a way that we can work with you to create conditions that the reporting really entails an operational definition, not a legal, an operational definition of what constitutes urban in your respective country in order to better understand what are the most important changes and opportunities in the country. And we have created guidelines that my colleague Ben is going to present to you. That is really a roadmap on the specific indicators and processes associated to the main outcomes of the new urban agenda. As you remember, the urban agenda has commitments, has a structure that is based on the sustainability development with the social, economic, and environmental elements. And we have created also what we call the drivers for sustained change on what countries and cities are doing in terms of urban economy, in terms of urban planning, in terms of laws and regulations. And we have used the same structure of the Quito resolution of political outcome, technical political outcome, to create these guidelines. Also, important to say that new urban agenda, unlike the sustainable development goals, do not have a specific indicator framework in order to report. So we have been working with your national statistic offices, with your peers in terms of technical monitoring, and we have proposed that Robert, the chief of the data, what used to be the Global Urban Observatory, has created in order to capture the most important elements, what constitutes the new urban agenda. So with good guidelines, with good monitoring framework, and with an excellent, because honestly, what Lynn just presented, the platform is excellent repository and data analysis for all these, we will be having the certainty that we have a strong monitoring mechanism and the possibility to have a continuous dialogue with you. Monitoring and reporting is not a process, it's not a one day, it's a process, it's a long-term process in which we, in an incremental manner, want to build with you indicators and analysis. We understand that not all countries, not all cities are in the same level of data capturing and indicators, and we would like to build and stabilize all these countries. And we have produced only the last year 40 training to national statistic officers in order to improve this. So I think with this element to say that In UN Habitat, we have created the conditions really for member states to have the best monitoring mechanism, which means the best policy responses associated to urban, and to use urban for what it is a strong force for national change, and also a very good way of dealing with some of the pressing issues of your own countries, poverty, inequality, climate change, etc. So in this way, we will have the equation on with all these elements to produce better urban policies in the countries. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Eduardo, for these words. Nothing to add. Therefore, let me give the floor to Ben to present the reporting guidelines. Ben, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me try to locate my. I'm still trying to load my presentation.
It's not the one that is advocacy and campaigns, right?
No, it's not that one. Sorry, I don't know where that one is even coming.
All right.
Okay. It was cool. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, wherever you are. My name is Ben Arima. I work in Habitats. I am the chief of the Global Report and Trends Unit. My work entails the World Cities Report, preparing the World Cities Report or coordinating the World Cities Report. And I am responsible for preparing the guidelines for which the national report on the implementation of the New Urban Agenda will be prepared. I will quickly go through this because I think Lynn has covered some of this, and I think the guidelines have been sent to member states as far back as October last year. But I will start with what I refer to as here the mandate for these guidelines or the national reports. And all these are indicated in the New Urban Agenda document. You know, it talks about having a periodic review of the urban agenda in order to track progress, assess impact, and ensure the agenda's effective and timely implementation. It talks about its country-led, which Eduardo mentioned, and it's also going to provide the basis for the Secretary General's second quadrennial report. So we expect voluntary inputs from member states, which will report on the progress made in the implementation of the report, and it's going to be based on the quantitative and qualitative analysis. And most part of these guidelines, the report will be qualitative. My colleague who will be talking about the monitoring framework will be talking about the quantitative indicators. What I want to show right now is the structure of the guidelines and the reports. And the structure of the guidelines and the report, your national reports, will follow the format of the New Urban Agenda. We have the first aspect, which is the transformative commitments. That is the first section, the first major section. And under this, we have 3 transformative commitments. And then under each of these transformative commitments, we went through the New Urban Agenda document and we broke it down further. If I take example of just the first one,
sorry, why you don't put it, because some people are saying they cannot see, you put it in the full presentation mode of the, it will be much better.
Okay, so now what we have here in this case is that we have the first, we have here the 3 transformative commitments, and then the report, like I indicated, your national reports will be based on will follow the format of the New Urban Agenda document, and we have tried to unpack it and define this for you. So we have the first transformative commitment, and I'll use that as an example. I'm not going to go through all of them, which is sustainable urban development for social inclusion and ending poverty. And under this base, after mapping out the contents of the new urban agenda, we decided to break this into 3 categories. We have social inclusion and ending poverty. We have access to adequate housing, and we have access to basic services. And then in the guidelines sent to you, each of these 3 categories is further broken down, some of them into 3 or 4 categories. So this is what happens in the case of the transformative commitments. We have the 3 transformative commitments, the one on social inclusion and ending poverty. We have the one on inclusive urban prosperity and opportunities for all. And we have environmentally sustainable and resilient urban development. So all these collectively constitute part 1, or the first major part of your report. And it's going to be quite extensive. In other words, we want to know what your countries have been doing with respect in terms of social inclusion and ending poverty. So you'll give us an indication of what has happened over the past 4 or 5 years, or since the adoption of the new urban agenda. And then again, after that, we have the effective implementation. In other words, after meeting the transformative commitment, what were the basis for meeting the transformative commitments? Again, if you look at the new urban agenda document, the effective implementation is broken down into 3 categories. We have the building, the urban governance structure, and establishing the supportive framework. We have planning and managing urban spatial development. We have the means of implementation. And then each of these are further unpacked, again, based on the mapping and categorization of the new urban agenda documents. And if I go to the next stage, okay, this again, in the next stage here, the next level here, this breaks it down further. Like for instance, under social inclusion and ending poverty, we have, again, these are the 4 categories in which you will have to report on. The first one is, what have you done to eradicate poverty, policies, etc., not only at the national level, also at the subnational and the local level, including the role of non-state actors. Then we have the issue of inequality. We have the issue of social inclusion, especially as it relates to vulnerable groups, women, people, and persons with migrants. And then again, access to public spaces. So all these again come under the very first transformative commitment. So under this one, under the first transformative commitment, you have the social inclusion and ending poverty. You will discuss each of these 4 here, and under basic services, you will discuss 3. I'm only going to just focus on the first transformative commitment in order that I don't have to repeat myself. Again, this one relates to the second transformative commitment, and this relates to the third transformative commitment, again, on environment, and it follows the same procedure. We have the category, and then we have the subcategories for which you are supposed to report on extensively. And then if we now go, after discussing the transformative commitments, we now need to go to look at the effective implementation. So under the effective implementation, in other words, what are the basis, or what forms the basis for implementing the new urban agenda, for achieving those transformative commitments? So the first one we have here, we have the governance structure. And again, it follows the format of the new urban agenda. We have not deviated from the new urban agenda. And each of these 6 components that you have here are derived from a mapping of the new urban agenda under the issue of governance. So we have issues relating to decentralization, how you link urban policies with the mechanisms for financing, food financing mechanisms for achieving sustainable urban development, the policy and legal frameworks to enable the ability of government to implement policies. Then we talk about the capacity of local and subnational governments. And then we talk about the implementation, again, a participatory approach here, where we talk about age, gender approaches to urban planning and policy. And then again, we look at the issue of women's participation in all fields of decision making. So you have to report on what your countries and states at various levels have done in this respect. And under the next aspect of the effective implementation of the new urban agenda, we have planning and managing urban spatial development. And again, not just going through, these are the various categories. So under under planning and managing urban spatial development, we will have to report on these 7 categories. We talk about what have you done in terms of implementing integrated, balanced territorial development policies. We know in many member states that developments is skewed, is concentrated in certain areas. So what have you done in terms of achieving a more balanced territorial development? The issue of integrating housing into urban development plans, we've talked about that in Habitat. The inclusion of culture, again, to what extent does culture feature in urban planning? And then these are the other categories. And then after that, we have the means of implementation. And what we have done in the means of implementation, again, is to identify what are the possible means of implementation based on the new urban agenda. And 3 categories of the means of implementation have been identified. The first one is the mobilization of financial resources, which is very much important, especially again now with the onset of COVID that predicts that there will be a decline in the finance available to cities, countries at all levels. So again, we look at what are the financial frameworks that you've used in this case, both the mobilization of internal and external sources of revenue. Again, how do you promote sound systems of financial transfers from local governments, from national to subnational and local governments? And again, how do you mobilize and establish financial intermediaries from other sources, whether they are banks, private sources of financing, etc. And then we have the issue of capacity, which is always a problem when it comes to implementation. So we have questions. So we expect member states to report on what they have done in terms of capacity development. And in order to guide you, we have provided these 7 categories. And then the issue of innovation, information, technology, and innovation, which is increasingly becoming very much important. Many member states are moving to smart cities, the issue of big data, open data, which enhances transparency in decision making. All these effectively and ultimately contribute to the new urban agenda. So we expect countries to report on this. And again, as we've indicated in the guidelines, is not only just reporting at the country level, but also what are local governments doing, what are subnational governments doing, and again, what are non-state actors doing as well. And then thereafter, we have the last aspect, which is the follow-up and review. Again, the follow-up is, in this case, it's quite simple. We want to know, again, have you developed specific monitoring mechanisms to report, to monitor and report on the implementation of the new urban agenda? We would like to know what has been done in this kind of situation. And again, the guidelines that we sent, they are quite extensive. They talk about the challenges that you faced here, the new perspectives, and all other things that can facilitate the implementation of the new urban agenda. And the last thing I just want to talk about here, just more or less like preparing the reports. Again, we believe that this should be a participatory approach. This, again, I could have put it first, but I decided to bring it last so that it can linger on. One is that I think this is, as clearly indicated in the new urban agenda documents, this is country-led. So this is supposed to be led by the key ministry that addresses the issue of urbanization. Of course, we know that we have various bureaucratic arrangements in addressing the issue of urbanization in countries. So again, it could be either a key ministry, maybe it could be the Ministry of Urbanization, Ministry of Land, or at times it could be a consortium of ministries that deal with urbanization, because the issues of urbanization, they cut across. We have the issue of water, we have environment, we have housing, all other aspects, and they intersect. So it could be a consortium of ministries. In some countries, we have the National Habitat Committees and the National Urban Forum. Where these exist, these two bodies can play a key role or take the lead in preparing the report. So again, it's going to be based on the situation on the ground. And the situation on the ground will vary from one country to another country. Again, it clearly indicates in the new urban agenda that this has to be country-led. It has to be open, inclusive, multi-level, participatory, and has to be a transparent process. So it's a process-based approach. You want to get a wide range of stakeholders as much as possible. And then in preparing the report, we don't want the report to just sit in one arm of government. We want, again, and then these are the guidelines that are provided in terms of the team that will prepare the report. One, it should be representative of national governments. It should be representative of local governments and their national associations. And it should be, we also have the issue of regional governments. In some countries, we have 3 levels of government. Some we have 2. Even in some, we have 4 levels of government. So again, we have a multi-level nature in this kind of situation. We expect the role of civil society, the private sector, including NGOs, the media, professional societies, private sector, women groups, etc. And we see that all around the world, again, we have a massive movement of youth yearning for change and things like that. So we hope that all these will also be integrated here. And then we have the issue of academic institutions, and we have external support agencies. Again, in many countries, we have the UN, UNDP and UN offices, the rest offices. So all these should come together to play a role in having a report that is quite inclusive, a report that is indicative of the progress made in the implementation of the new urban agenda. And the last thing I need to say is that, again, in the reporting of this, where possible, again, the national planning commissions or statistical commissions in each country, they've been sensitized on the role on this kind of situation. So what we need to know in this kind of situation is that the data needs to be representative, the data needs to be disaggregated on the basis of gender, on the basis of youth, etc., and all possible categories to be able to give us a very clear picture of the situation as it relates to the progress made in the implementation of the new urban agenda. And then just one more thing, again, these reports, again, we will have national reports from various countries. And then the issue now arises, how do we now analyze these reports? We have 6 UN regions, and these reports will be analyzed on the basis of the UN regions, and we will do some synthetic analysis, and we will also use all secondary data to be able to show clearly some of the issues that are arising here. And when we have the global report, the regional reports, these regional reports will now form the global report, which in turn will play a key role in preparing the quadrennial report of the Secretary General. The next quadrennial report is due in 2022. Yes, the 2022, because it's every 4 years. Okay, and one thing before I just round up, these reports, these guidelines, we are sent to member states in October, by the second week in October. The initial plan was that we will receive it October last year. We will receive the guidelines, the report based on these guidelines, November this year. But several member states have requested that we postpone the dates for submission because of the disruptions that have been caused by the impact of COVID-19. So we expect reports to come in by March. Those that are ready, we will receive them, and those that are not ready, we'll expect them by March. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope I did not overshoot my time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ben, for this detailed presentation on the use of the guidelines as member state do reporting on the human agenda. Let me now turn to Ben. Ben, to Robert. Robert, I would like to give you 5 minutes to take us through the indicator framework for the human agenda. As Eduardo said, the new urban agenda is not like the SDGs when we have an agreed upon a set indicator framework. So can you please highlight for member states and other stakeholders who join us today what we intend to do with indicators when it comes to the new urban agenda? Ben, over to you. Robert?
Thanks a lot, Pacom. Let me know once you see my
we can see
presentation.
We can see your presentation, but please,
okay,
please, Robert, try to be as succinct as possible so that we have time to take questions and comments from participants.
Thank you, Pacom. I'm going to do my best from 10 to 5 minutes, no worries.
Okay.
So what I'm going to run through very quickly is the process for the new urban agenda monitoring framework. And this has been developed through a very much consultative process. So we have draft 1, which is ready to be used by member states. The history for this is clearly that we have borrowed from a lot of the already existing frameworks, particularly the SDGs. So we do have a total of 77 indicators that we have proposed, but almost half of these are already SDG indicators. So for member states and any other agencies already involved in the SDG data collection, you will find it as good news that half of what is in the new urban agenda already constitutes the sets that you're also going to be collecting. The other half is, of course, very new. And as colleagues have said, we have mapped all these indicators across the transformative commitments, as well as the categories of the effective implementation. So what we've tried to do in terms of the real process is what you see on the screen now. We are taking, for example, the first transformative commitment. We've mapped out the categories, and each of those categories, we've at least pulled out one representative indicator that you can work with to help you in the reporting process that Ben has already explained. The full set of all these indicators is also available on the platform, but you can also reach out to us for easy access in case you are unable to reach out and get it from the platform. And essentially what you'll find in the monitoring framework guide is each of these indicators mapped across these transformative commitments or the categories for effective implementation. And in those indicators, we explain the rationale for that indicator. We explain the concepts that it refers to, how the data should be collected, and where it should be collected, and with whom you should collect that sort of information, as well as guiding you on the potential frequency for collecting such information to allow you to report every 4 or 5 years. So the slides you see, showing right now is just basically the complete mapping that we've done for each of these categories across these various commitments. And the same issue also applies to the component for the effective implementation. What is also crucial to note is that in the set of the 77 that we have provided, we have both qualitative and quantitative measures integrated. So you'll be able to see, for example, the indicator here, number 20, does your country have a national urban policy? Many of these are not necessarily quantitative, but they're actually looking for the qualitative components that the new urban agenda requested for. And in terms of the process that follows this, we do hope that we'll get a lot of feedback as you continue to work with this monitoring framework. And being that this is a living document, we do hope that any feedback that comes through will allow us to revise and incrementally improve on the sharpness of the indicators, but also the content on the whole monitoring framework. And in terms of the next steps that we are really looking at, we are hoping to embark on a very aggressive capacity building initiative, particularly with a multiplicity of partners and disciplines you work with at the national level. New urban agenda requires that you have the capacities both at national, subnational, but as well as beyond all the other stakeholders. So we do hope to support the development of that. We're also working on producing e-learning materials, which will allow you to seamlessly go through the training packages at your own pace. But at the same time, as you begin to collect the data and information, we do hope that we can walk with you through the journey for collecting the data, but also packaging that information into the reports. We are usually an email or a phone call away, and we'll be happy to help with that specific process. I will now hand over back to Pacom, and thanks a lot. My 5 minutes are up.
Thanks, Robert. That was very effective. Thank you very much. So to members still joining us today, I would like to open the floor to you to take your questions, comment, and we're happy to respond. Again, the purpose of the session is that by the time we leave here, you have clarity as to what to do in using the platform to report on your various activities as you're implementing the new urban agenda. The floor is open to everyone to take it. You can use the chat box or the raise your hand function of Teams if you want to take the floor. The floor is open. I see no one taking the floor for now. Let me just say, while you're thinking of where you want to take the floor or not, that today's presentations will be sent to you in a package, and of course you can always come back to us with questions and comments by emails as you see fit. So Okay. I see a hand from Monica Glinsler. Monica, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm Monica Glinsler from South Africa. I wasn't able to write my country name for some reason. And thanks so much for organizing this webinar. We are really looking forward to contributing and making our input into the platform and the reports. Mine is probably just a very practical question in the way that you've structured the sort of online submission. As you may imagine, writing up such a report is quite an involved process requiring a lot of consultation and wordsmithing to get to agreed texts within our internal stakeholders. So, which means it won't be just me writing up a factual report. So is it possible to cut and paste into the various fields, or is it typing only as we submit our inputs?
Okay, thanks, Monica. Osa, Olin, you want to respond to this?
Yes, I can respond to that. Thank you, Monica, for your question. That's a very good question. Yes, it is possible to cast and paste on the form. Once you have the text ready or the final text, you can always cut and paste on the form. Also, it has a save option, which will allow you to fill in the form within a period of time. It doesn't have to be specifically at that very moment that you log into the form.
Maybe just to add, if I may, Pacom, to this question, to add to Lynn, we understand that there will be drafts and these will not be viewable by anyone in the public. So you are working on a draft that only belongs to you, because we recognize that this is a process. So it's only when you click the final button that it will actually be submitted. Thanks.
Thank you, Osa and Lynn. Any other question or comment?
There is a question, Pacom, from Lohan on the chat.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. Thanks, Eduardo. Lohan is saying, hello everyone, sorry I can't unmute. So I see, is there any relation between the new urban agenda and CPI? I mean, could we use CPI indicators in relevant with SDGs 11 and peers to monitor the urban agenda? Ben, do you want to respond to this, Ben and Eduardo, or Robert and Eduardo?
I can take part of the response and perhaps Robert to complement. This is an excellent question from Luhan, and for all member states to tell you what we want with this process is to avoid that you have double or triple reporting. We find you that you invest in reporting in your urban agenda and then in the SDGs when the time comes for that. And we have simplified through the presentation that Robert made on the indicators, which are to large extent CPI inspired indicators in terms of the method of analysis, etc. So we are not duplicating. You could eventually report on CPI, and we will look at this and look at the complement on this. But if you follow what Robert presented, you will be seeing that it's just a change in the format, but it's a lot of the CPI indicators. And also there is a moment that you will be asked to report on goal 11 of SDGs. So with this method and with this platform, you will have the same reporting process. This is important because as the previous question that Monica formulated, we will guide you to simplify the process as OSA responded, to do it incremental, but at the same time to help you to compile the best responses that you need for the different components. Like this, you will have a strong report, and we will have the possibility of creating a platform for compilation of the whole process. Over to you, Robert.
Thanks, Eduardo. That's well addressed. So I hand back to Pacom.
Okay, thanks, Eduardo and Robert. Any other questions or comments on the various presentations? I don't see any. Should I take it that everything that was said, presented today is clear for everyone, and that you have the tools, also understanding of how to utilize the platform. And with this, as we said, the deadline for submitting the report has been pushed to March of 2021. But as Ben also indicated, if your reports are ready before that, we're very happy to also take them. Okay, all right. So then, Osailin, please put together a package of everything that was presented today, so that this can be shared with participants, but also other member states who are not able to participate in today's session. Yeah.
Yes,
We will certainly do so.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So with this, unless there is anything from my colleagues, no. So with this, let me once again thank all of you for making time to be part of this webinar. Of course, the process of reporting on what we're doing with the urban agenda, it's fundamental. It's fundamental in the context of the 2030 agenda. It's fundamental because the urban agenda is an accelerator to the SDGs. So what we do and what we're gonna do here, it's very, very important. So thank you very much for making time. We'll share with the material, but if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be very happy to respond and assist. Once we've agreed on the date of the next webinar, we will communicate with all of you. So thank you very much, and see you soon. Thanks. Bye bye.